Sergeant Eli Ward's eyes fluttered open. His head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and a sour metallic taste filled his mouth. The last thing he remembered was the deafening explosion, the roar of plasma fire as he fought to hold his ground against the Trivax soldiers on a distant, barren world. The Trivax had been relentless, their onslaught nearly wiping out his squad. He'd taken a hit, felt the burn of plasma searing through his armor before the world around him had gone dark. Now, as he slowly sat up, Eli realized he wasn't on the battlefield. The walls around him were smooth and gleaming, made of a material that didn't look like anything he had seen before. The room was dimly lit, but the air was sterile, almost too clean, and smelled faintly of antiseptic. He ran his fingers over his armor and then his chest. There were no burns, no scars. His injuries, all too fresh in his memory, were gone, as if they had never existed. A soft hum filled the air, and the disorienting sensation of weightlessness settled over him. He instinctively reached for the floor, but there was none. He was floating in midair. Panic briefly set in, but Eli pushed it down. He had to stay calm, think clearly. His years of training kicked in, sharpening his focus. His hand went to the sidearm strapped to his waist, but it wasn't there. Instead, he found a small, thin bracelet around his wrist, unfamiliar and intricately designed, almost like a communicator or tracker. "Where the hell am I?" he muttered under his breath. His eyes scanned the room, and that's when he saw the door. It was just a faint outline against the far wall, glowing with a soft blue light. Before he could make a move, a voice echoed through the room, smooth, but with an undeniable alien cadence. "Human specimen. Sergeant Eli Ward. You have been selected for observation. Your cooperation is requested." Eli froze. The voice sounded like it was coming from everywhere, yet nowhere at all. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. He stood up, ignoring the dizziness from the zero-gravity environment, and pushed off the surface toward the door. It slid open before he even touched it, revealing a narrow corridor beyond. A series of lights flickered on as he entered, the smooth walls around him curving slightly, leading him down the hall. Every instinct told him to find a way out, but something felt wrong, off. The weightlessness, the lack of sound or disturbance. It was almost as if he were being watched, monitored. A sense of dread crept over him, but he swallowed it down. One step at a time, he reminded himself. Find answers, then find a way back. As he passed through a set of translucent doors at the end of the corridor, Eli's eyes widened. He was no longer alone. The space opened into an immense chamber, filled with hundreds of beings of all shapes, sizes, and colors. Some were humanoid, others more bizarre, tentacled creatures, insect-like beings, and floating orbs. They all turned in unison as he entered, their eyes, or what he assumed were their eyes, fixed on him. Eli froze in place, meeting their gazes one by one. He wasn't sure whether they were curious, hostile, or indifferent, but one thing was clear: he was the center of their attention. And then, a voice once again reverberated through the chamber. "Behold the human, our newest prize." It wasn't a greeting. It was an announcement, a declaration. He was no longer just a soldier. He was an object, a thing to be observed. Eli's pulse quickened, but the only thing he could do was stand tall and force his mind to focus. He had survived impossible odds before. He could survive this. He had to. Eli stood frozen, a mixture of disbelief and defiance swirling within him as he was slowly scanned by the alien eyes in the massive chamber. The beings around him seemed less like individuals and more like an audience, expectant, waiting. The air hummed with the quiet vibration of technology beyond his understanding, and the walls of the arena-like space seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Eli took a deep breath, resisting the urge to reach for a weapon he no longer had. There was no point in rushing in blind. A figure moved through the crowd. It was tall, its skin translucent, shimmering with hues of blue and purple that shifted with each step. Its eyes, or what might have been eyes, were large and reflective, with no visible pupils, just endless pools of black that held no emotion. This alien moved with a grace that made it seem almost ethereal, yet Eli couldn't shake the feeling that it was in charge of this strange gathering. The creature stopped in front of Eli, looking him up and down. It tilted its head, a gesture that Eli could only interpret as curiosity. "Human," it said, its voice a smooth, resonating tone. "You are unlike any of the specimens we've collected. Your species is rare, resilient, your survival instincts unparalleled. That is why you have been chosen for our observations." Eli held the alien's gaze, refusing to show weakness. His throat felt dry, but he forced out the words. "Observation. What do you mean? What's going on here?" The alien did not respond immediately. Instead, it stepped back and raised one of its arms. Eli flinched instinctively, but no attack came. Instead, a holographic display flickered to life in midair, casting a faint blue light across the chamber. On the screen, an intricate map of stars appeared, followed by images of various creatures, some familiar, others completely alien to Eli's eyes. The creatures displayed were beings that appeared to be from worlds far beyond Earth, each captured and put on display for the amusement of whoever was in charge of this strange arena. "This is the Intergalactic Coliseum," the alien explained, its voice like the ringing of a bell. "A place where the rarest life forms in the galaxy are showcased. Beings such as you, human, are brought here for observation. Your behavior, your abilities, your survival tactics, all will be scrutinized by the countless species who have gathered here for one purpose: entertainment." Eli's mind raced as he processed the words. "Entertainment. You bring beings from across the galaxy here to watch us like we're animals in a zoo." The alien's expression remained unchanged, but it nodded slowly. "Precisely. But unlike the creatures you may know from your home planet, these beings are not so easily understood. They are all legends in their own right. Champions, hunters, and warriors from countless worlds, each with their own unique abilities. Yet, despite all their prowess, none have been able to match the unpredictability of the human species." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Eli noticed some of the beings were nodding, as though agreeing with the alien's words. Some appeared intrigued, while others seemed almost disappointed by the nature of the human race's reputation. He felt the weight of their collective gaze, each one sizing him up, judging him as if he were nothing more than a prize to be claimed. "The rules are simple," the alien continued. "You will be studied, examined, and observed. Your actions will determine your fate. Whether you survive or fail is entirely up to you." Eli clenched his fists at his sides. "So I'm a specimen, a prize to be won. What if I don't play by your rules?" The alien's smile, if it could be called that, was a faint curl of its lips, barely noticeable but chilling nonetheless. "Then, human, you will not survive. Your survival here is not assured. But I'm certain you will be." "Interesting." Eli took another deep breath, his mind racing for a plan. He had no idea where he was or how he had gotten here, but one thing was clear: this was no ordinary situation. These creatures, these beings, had taken him far from Earth, far from his comrades. And now, in the face of an unknown future, he would have to rely on his sharpest weapon, his mind. He had to outwit them, outlast them, and somehow, against all odds, find a way to turn their entertainment into his escape. Eli's pulse quickened as the enormity of his situation settled in. The alien in front of him, still watching with that detached, almost clinical curiosity, seemed to sense his uncertainty. It gestured toward the group of onlookers, and the crowd shifted, creating an open space in the center of the arena. A cold, sterile light washed over the floor where Eli stood, illuminating his every movement, every breath. "You will be tested," the alien said simply, turning and raising one hand, as if to signal an unseen force. "Your survival will begin now." Before Eli could react, the air around him shimmered, and suddenly, the smooth floor beneath his feet seemed to ripple, revealing a small raised platform where a single bright orb appeared. The object floated towards him and stopped inches from his chest, humming with energy. He instinctively took a step back, wary of whatever strange contraption was now in his presence. The orb emitted a soft glow, and a voice echoed through the air, not from any particular direction, but as if it came from the very walls themselves. "Human specimen, you will now demonstrate your intellect. This will not be a battle of strength, but of strategy and survival. Should you fail, your existence will be considered expendable." Eli's mind raced. No weapons, no armor, just his wits. The orb emitted a small flash, and before he could react, the ground beneath him shifted, and he found himself standing in a completely different environment, like the simulated landscapes used in military training exercises. But this one was much more complex. He stood in a dense alien jungle, the air thick with humidity. Towering, twisting plants surrounded him, and the sky above was a swirling mixture of purple and green, giving the scene an almost dreamlike quality. In the distance, he could hear the faint rustle of something moving, though the source was unclear. Eli instinctively surveyed the surroundings, taking stock of everything in sight. His mind began to process the situation. He was being watched, and these creatures were testing him, not just physically, but mentally. This was no longer just about survival. It was about outwitting them, understanding the rules of their game, and using his training to stay one step ahead. The voice returned, distant but still clear. "The challenge is set. Adapt, overcome. Your actions will be analyzed. Fail, and the consequences will be irreversible." He didn't need to hear more. Eli knew that the only way out was through. In the military, he'd been taught to read his environment, to find the smallest details others might miss, to use the terrain to his advantage. This alien jungle might look strange, but it was no different from any hostile environment he'd faced before. The key would be patience and observation. Eli crouched low to the ground, studying the thick roots and underbrush that surrounded him. As he moved through the jungle, he kept his steps light, testing the ground beneath him. The sounds of rustling leaves and distant growls hinted at the presence of something larger, something dangerous. But Eli didn't rush in. He waited. The orb floated beside him, occasionally flashing with light, as if keeping track of his every movement. The pressure to perform was immense, but Eli knew he couldn't afford to let panic control him. Instead, he focused on the strategy. Observe, adapt, and find patterns. The jungle wasn't random. It was a puzzle, and Eli's mind was sharp enough to figure it out. Then he spotted something, a strange creature emerging from the shadows of the trees. It was tall, thin, with elongated limbs that seemed to bend at unnatural angles. Its skin shimmered in the dim light, making it almost invisible against the backdrop of the foliage. Eli stayed still, watching, waiting for the creature to make its next move. It wasn't just its form that caught his attention. It was the way it moved. Slow, deliberate, controlled. Like it was a test of some kind, and it was waiting for him to make the first mistake. The creature paused and turned its head, locking eyes with Eli for a brief moment. The silence was thick, tension mounting in the air. Eli didn't flinch. He held his ground. This isn't just about survival. This is a game, and I know how to play games. He silently surveyed the landscape once more, looking for an escape route or a weakness. His military training had always been about more than just fighting. It was about adapting, finding the smallest vulnerabilities and exploiting them. This challenge wasn't about brute force. It was about outthinking whatever alien intelligence had created this twisted spectacle. The creature stepped forward again, but this time, Eli didn't react. Instead, he moved sideways toward a cluster of larger, thorn-covered plants. They could be dangerous, but they were also a perfect trap. Eli allowed himself a quiet smile. He wasn't going to play by their rules. He was going to make them play by his. This was only the beginning. The alien jungle faded around Eli like a mirage, and for a moment he stood in a haze of confusion. But his survival instincts kicked in, and he shook the dizziness off, forcing himself to focus. The orb, still hovering beside him, flashed intermittently, its soft hum acting like a constant reminder that he was being watched. Eli knew this was far from over, but he had learned something crucial. The challenge wasn't just about escaping. It was about outsmarting the observers. The more they pushed him, the clearer it became. They were testing him, but they weren't infallible. If he played it right, he could turn the tables. But before he could plot his next move, the scene shifted once again. This time, the environment wasn't a jungle, but a vast open arena, a massive coliseum with towering walls and a distant, sky-like ceiling that made it impossible to gauge the true size of the space. It was eerily silent except for the low buzz of activity on the outskirts. As the arena materialized around him, Eli instinctively tensed, scanning the space for any sign of danger. But to his surprise, there were no immediate threats. Instead, in the center of the arena, a figure approached him, a figure dressed in dark, sleek armor, standing tall and proud with an air of authority that suggested experience. The crowd of alien onlookers, though distant, seemed to watch intently, waiting for the next act to unfold. The figure was a gladiator. Eli could feel it. It was in the way the person carried themselves, a silent confidence in every step. This was someone who had fought countless battles and won. But what caught Eli's attention was the aura of mystery that seemed to hang around this warrior. She was not like the others he had encountered so far. Her movements weren't alien. They were familiar. Her posture was more human than anything he'd seen in this place. The warrior stopped in front of him, and for a long moment, they simply stared at each other. She didn't speak, but the intensity in her gaze told Eli everything he needed to know. She wasn't here to fight. At least, not in the way he might have expected. There was something deeper at play. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice soft yet filled with weight. "You are human," she said, almost as if tasting the word on her tongue. "I thought the legends were exaggerated. But now I see. They were not." Eli frowned, the words sending a chill through him. "Legends? What are you talking about?" The woman's eyes softened, a hint of something almost like pity flickering across her face. "There was a time, long before the arena, when humanity was revered by the galaxies. They called you the Wanderers, explorers who never stopped fighting for your survival. You fought not just for yourselves, but for others, for the weak, for the lost." Eli's breath caught. This wasn't the same story he'd heard about humanity back on Earth. Back home, humanity's greatest glory had been in conquering planets, establishing dominance. He had never heard of a time when humans were revered across the stars for anything other than their capacity for war. "Why do you speak of us like that?" Eli asked, his voice a mix of confusion and cautious curiosity. The warrior smiled faintly, a shadow of something old and painful crossing her face. "Because I know what happened to your people. Your ancestors weren't just survivors, they were protectors. And now you are here, trapped, just as I was. But you might yet have a chance." Eli's confusion deepened. A chance for what? To escape. To bring back that spark, the one that once made humans a force to be reckoned with. But you will need to find your way through the arena, through the games. And there is one thing I must warn you, human. The warrior leaned in closer, lowering her voice to a whisper. "You must not trust the ones who call themselves observers." Eli felt the weight of her words sink in, his thoughts racing. This place, this arena, was far more than just a game for the aliens. It was a prison, a twisted form of entertainment, and it had a history much deeper than he could have ever imagined. And this woman, this gladiator, seemed to know more than she was willing to say. Eli nodded slowly, determination beginning to rise in him once more. He wasn't going to let these beings control his fate. He would uncover their secrets, find his way out, and if there was even the slightest chance to bring humanity's lost legacy back to the stars, he would take it. But for now, he needed to understand this arena. He needed to learn its rules. And for that, he would need an ally. Someone who had been here longer than him. Someone who understood the game. The warrior's gaze softened, as though reading his thoughts. If you are to survive, human, you must learn how to play their game. And I can help you, if you are willing to listen. The warrior's words lingered in Eli's mind, stirring something deep within him. A sense of hope, but also a sharp edge of suspicion. She had been here longer than him, trapped in this twisted arena. He could see it in her eyes, the weariness of someone who had fought and survived countless battles. But something in her demeanor told him that she hadn't simply been a pawn in this game. She had been playing it, adapting to survive, just like he would have to. He studied her more carefully now, noticing the slight shifts in her posture, the almost imperceptible way she scanned the arena around them. She was always alert, always calculating. "I'll listen," Eli said, his voice firm. "But I need answers. How do I get out of here? How do I stop being part of this game?" The warrior nodded, glancing over her shoulder at the far-off crowd of alien spectators, their eyes fixated on the two of them. "They won't let you leave without a fight," she said quietly, as if speaking to herself. "The arena is more than just a physical space. It's a test, a trial. Every being here has been placed in a role, and that role must be played until the end." "Played," Eli repeated, narrowing his eyes. "What do you mean?" She turned back to him, her expression serious now. "They're not just watching us for entertainment. The arena is a crossroads. The observers are not some casual audience. They are the keepers of this universe, the ones who decide what lives and what dies. They're testing us, but not just our strength. It's about our essence, our will to survive. Those who survive long enough can earn a chance to leave, but that's rare." Eli's heart raced. "So you're saying there's a way out?" She hesitated, her face momentarily clouded with doubt. "It's not simple. You have to prove yourself worthy, not just to the observers, but to the system that holds us here. The arena is rigged. The creatures, the landscapes, they're all designed to make you fail." Eli's mind spun with the possibilities. Rigged. Of course, it made sense. Nothing in this place had felt natural. He had been thrown into these strange, dangerous environments, as though they were meant to push him to his limits. His instincts told him that survival wasn't just about physical endurance. It was about manipulating the system, finding its weaknesses. And if what the warrior said was true, then surviving here wasn't just about escaping the threats. It was about understanding how to use them. "So what's the key?" Eli asked, his voice low but determined. "How do I break out of their system?" The warrior's gaze softened slightly, as though she was finally seeing him for more than just another pawn. "The key lies in the game itself. You have to play their rules, but also bend them. Find the cracks, the places where they're not watching as closely. The challenge isn't just surviving. It's surviving in a way that forces them to take notice. You have to make them believe you're more valuable than you are." Eli nodded, taking in her words. It was a game of perception, of strategy. The observers wanted to see something different, something unique, something they couldn't predict. "Once you prove that you can outsmart the system, they'll start changing the rules," she continued, stepping closer to him. "They'll throw harder challenges your way, trying to force you into a corner. But that's when you need to show them what humans can do. The legends say that humanity once had the power to reshape the very fabric of reality. They called it willpower, determination, the ability to defy the impossible." Eli's mind raced. Willpower, the idea that humans could bend reality itself. He wasn't sure if that was true or if it was just a myth, but he knew one thing for sure. If there was even a sliver of truth to it, it could be the key to getting out of this place. "I won't play their game by their rules," Eli said, a grim smile pulling at the corners of his lips. "I'll show them what humans are capable of." The warrior's eyes brightened, a spark of something like hope igniting in them. "Then you might just have a chance, human." Eli glanced around the arena, taking in the watching crowd, and the silent, omnipresent force of the observers. If they were waiting for him to break, to fall into despair, they were going to be sorely disappointed. He would find a way out of this. He had to. For himself. For humanity. And maybe, just maybe, to remind these alien spectators why they had once feared humanity's resilience. As the silence stretched between them, the warrior finally spoke again, her voice laced with caution. "But remember, human, trust no one here. Not even me. The arena has a way of turning allies into enemies." Eli didn't flinch. He was already prepared for the worst. All he needed now was to figure out how to turn the tide in his favor. The warrior's warning echoed in Eli's mind as he moved deeper into the arena. Every step felt calculated, every glance over his shoulder more cautious. Trust no one. Not even her. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but in this place, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. The arena was a web of deception, and every corner seemed to hide another trap. His thoughts were interrupted as the ground beneath him trembled lightly, signaling another change in the environment. The air grew colder, and a sharp, biting wind cut through the arena, bringing with it the scent of metal and ash. The walls around him began to shift, sliding open like massive gates. A new landscape revealed itself, one far different from the strange jungle and vast coliseum he had previously encountered. Before him stood an ancient city, its towering spires rising into a stormy sky. The buildings were made of some dark, obsidian-like material, their surfaces etched with symbols and runes Eli didn't recognize. The streets were eerily empty, but the distant rumble of thunder hinted at an incoming danger. The city felt abandoned, haunted by something far worse than mere emptiness. Eli's instincts flared to life, alerting him to the oppressive atmosphere. Something was off. The orb hovered beside him, its soft hum becoming more insistent. As Eli surveyed the city, he saw movement in the shadows, shapes, fast-moving, almost invisible in the low light. He couldn't make out what they were, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. He wasn't alone here, and whatever lurked in this city was not waiting to play nice. The warrior's words came back to him. "Find the cracks. Outwit them. Show them what humans can do." Eli took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. His military training had taught him how to remain calm under pressure, how to assess a situation quickly and adapt. This was no different. He needed information. He needed to understand the layout of this new environment, the behavior of whatever creatures lurked in the shadows. And most importantly, he needed to figure out how to use the arena's rules against itself. He stepped cautiously into the city, his boots crunching against the cracked stone beneath him. Every turn he took felt like a gamble, but he had no choice. The moment he hesitated, it would be too late. The orb pulsed again, and Eli instinctively looked up. A figure appeared at the far end of the street, a silhouette outlined by the flickering light of distant flames. It was another gladiator, but this one was different from the warrior he'd encountered before. The figure was draped in dark, flowing robes, with an odd serpentine crown perched atop their head. They moved with an unsettling grace, their face obscured by shadows. As the figure drew nearer, Eli instinctively reached for his side. But he remembered. He had no weapons. His mind raced. "I need to play this smart." No direct confrontation. The robed gladiator stopped just within range of Eli, their voice soft but laced with an unsettling calmness. "So, the human decides to walk into my domain," they said, their tone almost mocking. "Brave, but foolish. Do you think you can survive here as you did in the other trials? This city is unlike anything you've encountered." Eli's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just another fight. The figure wasn't just challenging him physically. They were testing his resolve, his ability to adapt. But what kind of test was this? Eli remained silent, meeting the gladiator's gaze with unyielding determination. The figure tilted their head, seemingly amused by Eli's defiance. "I see," they said, almost to themselves. "You are not afraid, but you should be. This city is alive, human. It watches, listens, and it reacts. And it has already decided that you will not leave. You may survive the jungle, the Coliseum, but you will not survive here." Eli's mind raced as the figure's words sank in. This place wasn't just another arena. It was a living, breathing entity, one that could shape itself to its will. But if that was true, then perhaps it could also be manipulated. Find the cracks. There has to be a weakness. The gladiator raised a hand, and the ground trembled once more. A section of the city floor began to shift, revealing what looked like a massive pit, its depths disappearing into inky blackness. "This is the final test," the gladiator said, voice cold. "If you truly believe you can escape, you must face the pit. Only by surviving it will you prove your worth. But if you fail, the arena will consume you." Eli took a step back, his mind calculating. This wasn't just a test of physical endurance. It was a test of ingenuity. The pit was a challenge, a way for the observers to gauge his resourcefulness. If he could survive it, if he could outwit whatever mechanism lay within, he would force the observers to recognize his resilience. He had no choice but to accept the challenge. Stepping forward, he glanced over his shoulder one last time at the robed figure, who remained still, watching him like a predator tracking its prey. The arena's game was far from over, and Eli would play it on his terms. Eli's gaze lingered on the dark pit as the gladiator's ominous words echoed in his mind. The pit was vast, its edges sharp and jagged, the air around it heavy with an unnatural stillness. The deeper he looked, the more it seemed to pull at him, like an unseen force drawing him into its depths. It wasn't just a hole in the ground. It was a challenge, a final test, as the gladiator had said. And for all his military training, Eli knew this would be unlike anything he had faced before. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself. Adapt. Survive. Outsmart them. The warrior's words floated back to him, and for the first time since he'd been thrust into this alien game, he began to feel a sense of clarity. This wasn't about brute force or outmatching the creatures that lurked in the arena. It was about understanding the nature of the test. It was about using everything, his wits, his instincts, his very human willpower, to find a way through. Without another word, he stepped forward, moving toward the pit with slow, deliberate steps. The robed gladiator watched him, their expression unreadable, but there was a glint of something, perhaps respect, or maybe anticipation, in their eyes. As Eli neared the edge, he noticed the ground beneath him began to shift, the stone becoming uneven and unstable. It was as if the pit itself was alive, reacting to his presence. The walls of the pit began to hum, a low, resonating sound that vibrated through his chest. He knew that whatever came next, it would not be easy. Suddenly, the floor beneath him cracked, and a surge of energy pulsed through the air. The entire arena seemed to shift, and a series of metallic tendrils shot up from the pit's edges, twisting like serpents seeking their prey. Eli barely had time to react as one of the tendrils shot toward him, its sharp tip glinting in the dim light. Instinctively, he dove to the side, rolling as the tendril whipped past him, narrowly missing his arm. He could feel the heat from its passing and the power it carried. These were not just physical traps. They were designed to test his reflexes, his agility, and his ability to think on his feet. Eli's mind raced. What's the pattern? There had to be a rhythm to the tendrils' movements, some way to predict their next strike. He glanced around, his eyes scanning for any weakness or vulnerability in the pit's design. That was when he saw it, an exposed section of the pit's floor, slightly raised, with a faint glimmer of light shimmering from beneath it. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The tendrils seemed to avoid that spot, their strikes bypassing it entirely. This was his opening. Eli moved quickly, dashing toward the raised section of the floor, narrowly avoiding another tendril as it sliced through the air. He could hear the gladiator's voice in the distance, but it was drowned out by the sound of the tendrils whipping and the growing hum of the pit. Everything depended on his next move. If he could get to that raised spot, he could use it to his advantage, to climb, to hide, or perhaps even to manipulate the pit's shifting nature. As he reached the raised floor, Eli jumped, his hands grabbing onto the jagged edges of the stone. He pulled himself up, feeling the tendrils lash out below him, scraping against the stone as they searched for their target. But Eli was already a few steps ahead. He had made it. Now, standing at the edge of the pit, he could see the tendrils retreating, their movements becoming erratic, as though they weren't sure what to do with him. His heart pounded in his chest, but there was no time to rest. The gladiator's voice broke through the chaos, cold and unyielding. "You've made it this far, human, but this is only the beginning. The arena is not so easily outwitted. The true test lies ahead." Eli's breath came in short bursts as he surveyed the arena once more, his mind working overtime to assess the situation. This test wasn't just about surviving the pit. It was about proving that he could outlast the arena's ever-shifting dangers. If he could push through this, maybe, just maybe, he could reach the end. The game was far from over, and Eli was just getting started. Eli stood at the edge of the pit, his body still tense from the adrenaline, every nerve firing as he surveyed the arena. The tendrils had receded, but the faint, eerie hum of the arena's energy still pulsed beneath the surface, vibrating through the stone and into his bones. The robed gladiator's words echoed in his ears. The true test lies ahead. He knew that this final trial would not be about surviving physical dangers or outwitting the traps. No, the arena had shown its hand, and now it was playing a far more dangerous game. It wasn't just testing his body. It was testing his very essence, his will to survive. He had already defied the odds. Now he had to prove he could rise above them. The air grew thick with tension, and the arena shifted again. The ground trembled, as though some massive entity was awakening beneath the surface. Eli's gaze darted around, his senses on high alert. The city, once ominous and lifeless, now seemed alive, as if the very stones were watching him. The shadows deepened, and a low rumble filled the air. From the darkness emerged something far worse than he could have anticipated. The ground split open, and from the crack, towering figures, twisted and nightmarish, rose. Their forms were grotesque, a hodgepodge of different creatures, stitched together with strange metal and organic material. They had the strength of titans, but their eyes, those were the eyes of the observers, cold and calculating. Eli's pulse quickened, but he didn't panic. This was the final challenge, to face the creations of the arena itself, beasts born of twisted alien technology. They were more than just physical threats. They were symbols of the system, of everything he had fought against. These were the arena's true enforcers, and if he didn't find a way to neutralize them, he would be trapped forever. For a moment, Eli's mind raced, weighing his options. The arena was alive, and these monsters were merely its puppets. The game wasn't about defeating them. It was about outsmarting them, manipulating the system to show his worth. If he could use the environment, turn the arena's own tactics against it, maybe he could defeat these enforcers and prove humanity's resilience. He noticed the patterns. The monsters moved in predictable ways, their movements synchronized as if they were part of a greater mechanism, following the rhythm of the arena's pulse. The arena was alive, and it had a heartbeat. Eli wasn't going to fight them. He wasn't going to fight the arena. He was going to take control of the game. Drawing on everything he had learned, Eli dashed toward the central column of the city. There, embedded in the stone, was a strange device, an energy core pulsing with the same energy that had activated the tendrils and shifted the environment earlier. It was the heart of the arena, the source of its power. If he could disrupt it, he could turn the arena's focus away from him. With a burst of energy, Eli reached the core, his hands trembling but steady. He planted a charge against the device. His military training had taught him how to manipulate alien tech when necessary. As the monsters drew closer, he held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The moment the charge activated, the arena roared to life, the sound deafening as the core shattered with a burst of light. The monsters froze, their movements stilled as the arena itself began to falter. The ground trembled again, but this time it wasn't in pursuit of its prey. The system was crumbling. Eli fell to his knees, his body exhausted, but his mind clear. The arena had been defeated, not by strength, but by understanding its rules. He had played its game, outsmarted it, and found a way to turn its power against itself. He had shown the observers that humanity was more than just a species to be hunted. As the light from the shattered core faded, the robed gladiator appeared again, standing tall amidst the chaos. Their voice was quieter now, almost reverent. "You've done what few others have. The arena has been bested, and you are free." Eli's chest rose and fell with each breath, but he knew this was just the beginning. The arena may have lost, but its watchers would not forget. The game was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy had only just begun. And as he looked up at the fading remnants of the arena, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity's story wasn't finished yet. It was only just beginning.